This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's not actually afternoon yet, is it? I can still officially say good morning, everyone. Welcome to the IIEA, and delighted to have Minister Stephen Doughty here, UK Minister of State for Europe, North America and Overseas Territories. And he has taken time out of a busy day. It must be said at the beginning of a busy day, because he's just landed, just here from the airport, with a bit of a delay, which explains the delay in our getting going here. So nobody's to be blamed for that. Thank you all for your attendance here in person, those of you who are here, and also those of you who are joining us online. Thank you for your attendance, and we look forward to an interesting engagement. Can I also extend a particular thanks to our friends and colleagues at the British Embassy for their help in organising this event, because as people will appreciate, ministerial trips, they're very fast, they're very full, the agendas tend to be very full, and it's a great honour for the Institute to have the Minister here at the start of such an engagement. The Minister will speak to us for maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, I'll leave it to him, in around that area, and then we'll go to a conversation, be an opportunity for people to ask questions, those in the room here, and also people who are joining us online. And as is the convention, you can join the discussion using the Q&A. If you're watching us online, you can join using the Q&A function on Zoom. Send in your questions once they occur to you, and we'll see if we have an opportunity to get to them after the Minister's presentation. And just a reminder that the presentation and the Q&A are all on the record. So, Stephen Doughty was appointed Minister of State for Europe, North America and Overseas Territories in the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office in July 2024. He was first elected as Welsh Labour and Co-operative Member of Parliament for Cardiff South and Penarth in November 2012. Previously, he worked for the OSCE Parliamentary Assembly and for members of the then National Assembly for Wales. Minister Doughty spent a number of years working for humanitarian and international development NGOs, including World Vision UK, Oxfam GB, Oxfam International, and Oxfam Cymru. During the previous Labour government, he was Special Advisor to the Secretary of State for International Development. He has also held the roles of Shadow Foreign Affairs and International Development Minister in 2020 and Shadow Minister for Europe, North America and Overseas Territories in 2021, a role that he now has in government, as I've said. So, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Minister Stephen Doughty.
Well, thank you very much, Alex. Thank you all for such a warm welcome, and forgive my pronunciation, but given my profound respect for Ireland and indeed the heritage of my own family, Dia Dív, To'achas urum ove ansha livenu. So it's a real pleasure, genuinely, to be with you. And particularly a year into my role as the UK's Minister for Europe. It's a particular honour to be invited to address you here at the Institute for International and European Affairs. 2 decades and counting into your important work, and with Paul and Martin at the helm of our respective embassies, it's a little surprise that things are going from strength to strength in our relationship. I'm somebody who's been very involved in UK-Irish relationships for a long time. I served as a member of the British-Irish Parliamentary Assembly, was part of initiatives actually involving young politicians from across the UK and Ireland in the follow-up to the Good Friday Agreement. And as I said, there are very deep connections that run in my own family. My own family originally hailed from Louth, from the O'Learys, who left during the famine to the United States. So my grandfather was actually an Irish New Yorker from the Bronx, who came over in the Second World War to fight and was wounded. And actually on my mother's side were Cassidys from Fermanagh. So it runs deep in my own family, and obviously representing a constituency like Cardiff South and Penarth, with a very, very deep Irish heritage, as indeed it has a heritage from many, many parts of the world, as a port, as a place of coal and steel and industry and internationalism. I've very much grown up with Irish connections deep in my own family and in my life. And indeed, when I was a young Some of my fondest memories were coming as a 6 or 7-year-old down to West Cork, to Barley Cove, and to Skibbereen, to Valentia Island. Absolutely beautiful places, and I've got friends all across the country, from Dublin to Kilkenny to Cork, and beyond. So this is a place I regularly spend a lot of personal time too. So genuine pleasure for me to be here today. In truth, I really relished the chance to be able to take on this role, and wanted absolutely to get here, at least in my first year. I've been traveling around Europe. I think I've done something like 22 countries now, as part of what we termed a reset of our relations with, not only with the European Union, but with Europe writ large, and particularly with our closest friends and partners. And we have been, myself, the Foreign Secretary, the Prime Minister and others, putting a huge amount of effort into particularly some of our key bilateral relationships, and this first and foremost among them. I'm particularly delighted with the success that we had at the summit, and the different discussions that have gone on since. And I think our relations, genuinely, I can say, are the best they've been for a very long time, and that is being reflected in the nature of the cooperation that we're now having, not just between ourselves, not just on the European stage, but globally too. And that's very much the tenor of my conversations, to come and meet my counterpart here in Dublin today, and members of the Oireachtas, and also to meet with business and others. But today, I'm particularly wanting to focus on the important topic of the relationship between our two countries, and what our relationship with Europe and the European Union means for that. As I said, later this afternoon, I'm going to hear from the British-Irish Chamber of Commerce as we discuss the latest on attracting investment. This is, of course, a relationship worth, I think it's 82 billion pounds, 100 billion euro, about cutting red tape, improving infrastructure, reducing costs in both the UK and Ireland. I'm going to speak to those relevant committees about foreign affairs more widely, and how the UK and Ireland can cooperate together on many, many topics. And I think, after what might charitably characterise as a testing chapter in our long and complicated history under the previous government, I really do want to celebrate the change that we've seen over the last year. And it's a change that's going to make a difference in all of our lives. And that's, of course, based on very sure foundations and bonds between our people and our families, many of them living and working across borders, students learning together on both sides of the Irish Sea, and those businesses sustaining those incredible trade links, boosting growth and creating jobs on both sides. The spirit of partnership that we defend values globally, defend our shared security, defend shared values on the world stage. And also our shared willingness and ability to work together to find common ground in which peace and prosperity can grow at home and indeed around the world. And of course, the Good Friday Agreement remains a testament to what we can achieve when we work together in a spirit of trust and compromise. And here, no less than around the world, we must continue to work on peace together alongside the communities most affected. We must never forget that the Good Friday Agreement is the foundation of all that has followed. So we are absolutely committed as a government to treasure and uphold its legacy through all that comes next as a shared priority. And I wanted to briefly reflect on the developments at the end of the last government, but that have continued into this one. Of course, the Windsor Framework has provided a stable and pragmatic basis for Northern Ireland's place in the UK's arrangements with the EU. It protects the Good Friday Agreement in all its dimensions, ensures there is no hard border on the island of Ireland, and upholds the integrity of the UK and EU single markets. And under the framework, Northern Ireland, of course, enjoys a special status with privileged access to both the UK and EU markets, which creates unique opportunities for investment, growth and prosperity, and also keeps unnecessary bureaucracy and barriers out of people's lives and businesses. But I'm pleased to say that we didn't just sit on that. The very, very successful summit that we had on the 19th of May, which it was really delighted to see not only the role that Ireland played in supporting us in the path to that agreement, but also the warm welcome it received across the political spectrum here, and indeed across the UK and Ireland. It fundamentally also supports the stability and prosperity of Northern Ireland, as well as our own relations. It reduces further unnecessary regulation, will further facilitate the flow of goods, and it's in all of our interest to make sure that Northern Ireland thrives. So we're going to continue the dialogue, the partnership that the arrangements require between all of those who are at stake in making sure the framework works on the ground, and most importantly, the communities of Northern Ireland themselves. And in Liverpool this spring, I know how much it meant to both the Prime Minister and the Taoiseach to be able to meet together and to build on that unique and enduring relationship. And we had that inaugural UK-Ireland summit, which is going to be the first in a series of summits and reflection of actually the day-to-day work that we are doing together on so many topics. And that was a culmination of a much needed reset, I think, in UK-Irish relations, and really comprehensive agreement I know many of you will be familiar with, that works on everything from energy to cultural links, a new youth summit, a commitment to the global multilateral system, international law, working together to strengthen international institutions, working together to prevent conflict, to build peace, sustain international development, and tackle the climate and nature crisis, including through our own incredible cooperation on energy and investment in renewables and that transition that we all know needs to happen. Stronger cooperation on maritime security, including protecting our common space and undersea infrastructure to improve our shared resilience, given the geography and that we share and the threats that we share from outside. And we're going to have annual consultations on foreign policy and security to work even more closely together to keep all of our people safe in a very challenging geopolitical circumstance. And so when the rest of Europe followed on the 19th of May, I think we all felt something shift, and that was a process that really began when we helped the European political community just weeks into being in office at Blenheim. It's been a real year of shift, and we now to move from that reset now into delivery and making sure all of this delivers on the ground for our businesses, for our people, for our shared security and prosperity. But let's be frank, it's been increasingly clear that our world is not in a good shape, to say the least. And in my conversations with counterparts here, and indeed across Europe and beyond, what comes through time and time again is a shared sense that the time is now to make the most of that package that we agreed and to drive it forward. And I think that is in many of those different domains that it covers. But we need to move beyond the narrow debates of the past, whether that's about the single market or the customs union or freedom of movement. You know our clear positions on those, but let's focus squarely and pragmatically on the practical solutions that our citizens and businesses need now. And we need to strengthen cooperation between independent sovereign nations across the board. And it's obviously far more than I can even cover here, but this is accompanied obviously by a number of the initiatives that we've taken in the UK in recent weeks, including our new industrial and trade strategies, and all of those are going to have the relationships both bilaterally with Ireland, but also more broadly with Europe at the heart of them. The new agreement with the EU has some key highlights. It's going to enable some smoother travel for people and pets alike. I was glad to be able to use the e-gates here in Dublin. Dublin was already leading the way on those in terms of using new technology, but we're working with partners now across Europe to make that a reality. We're also looking at a new youth experience scheme that's going to be brought in. We're looking at those improvements in SPS and veterinary agreements. We have a new agreement providing 12 years of stability and certainty on fishing access and rights for coastal communities. That SPS agreement, when it comes in, will make it easier for us to enjoy each other's food and drink, end lengthy lorry queues, including some of those checks that were going to come in, of course, between Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and will now negate the need for some of that infrastructure and complication that could have been in place. It's also got key agreements on how we cooperate for the security of our citizens in relation to facial image sharing, data sharing, work on tackling crime across borders. Crucially, a link between our emissions trading systems, which not least given the shared electricity market here on the island of Ireland, but also the challenges, as I set out, in relation to climate change and that energy transition. That's going to be good for bills and for customers, and it's good for lifting costly burdens from businesses too. And of course, given those geopolitical circumstances, a new security and defence partnership between the UK and the EU to formalise cooperation as we respond to the challenges that we face in the world. And 4 key themes to that that we're focused on: the response to the war in Ukraine and Russia, the Indo-Pacific, cooperation against hybrid threats, and also cooperation in areas that have perhaps not received the attention that they should have had over recent years, such as the Western Balkans. And I know these are shared interests between the UK and Ireland, and between the UK and the EU, and we're already hitting the ground running. I was with Kaja Kallas just a few weeks ago and have been meeting many European counterparts to take forward these discussions about how we respond to those challenges of our increasingly uncertain world. And obviously a key part as well, getting that security and defence partnership, access to, we hope, the Safe Defence Fund, which can support many both UK and European jobs. We've had a strategic defence review in the UK, and that obviously focuses on many conventional and other threats, but it also focuses on those new and emerging threats that we face, and indeed all of us face in this space, particularly in the hybrid area and cyber, the development of drone technology, and so on. And of course, there is a key ironclad commitment to Ukraine and to European security. And again, Ireland's leadership and support for Ukraine has been absolutely key. And I think the more common ground that we can find on some of those global challenges, not just in Europe, but more broadly, the better. Because having been in Kiev myself just a couple of months ago, while yet another bombardment was coming through of drones and missiles into the city centre, it's very clear to me about who is serious about peace here, which is Ukraine, and who is not serious about peace, which is Vladimir Putin. So I think all of this shows why we need to be working more closely together, why the UK and the EU need to be working closely together. But I see all these things not as, sometimes people say, is there a contradiction between the UK's role in NATO or a bilateral relationship or the UK-EU relationship or our work together in global international forums? I say, no. There's not a contradiction between these things. These are all different strands of a muscle. We're rebuilding, we're re-engineering some of those strands that were perhaps lost. And they're all going to do slightly different things. But when you flex them all together, they're going to be stronger for our security, stronger for our prosperity, stronger for our response to the climate and energy challenge, and stronger for standing up for the values and principles that we absolutely do share in the world. So I'm very optimistic, despite that geopolitical circumstance, about what we've achieved in the last year. I'm very excited, particularly about what's been achieved in the UK-Irish relationship. And there is a huge personal commitment from the Prime Minister, the Foreign Secretary, myself, Secretary of State of Northern Ireland, and so many others to this relationship. We've seen it, we've lived and breathed it. We want to now put that into action. So genuine pleasure to be with you all here today. And I'm sure we'll have some very varied and wide questions. Thank you very much, Jochen Barriau.
Thank you very much for that. And you've certainly set out your credentials, your Irish credentials, if I may describe them, very impressively. And you made the point once or twice there about the bilateral relationship between the UK and Ireland, and then the relationship that is there between the UK and the EU, because of course they are separate now for reasons that we're all too aware. And I wonder, you said there's no contradiction between them, or it doesn't need to be a contradiction. Is there a possibility, or to what extent can the bilateral, like a strong bilateral relationship between the UK and Ireland assist, if I can use that word, the UK in its relationship with the EU, and indeed the EU in its relationship in the other direction?
I mean, I think it could be hugely helpful, and obviously Ireland will take on the presidency of the EU in due course, and that's an important role, although I appreciate in that role have to act in a sort of a neutral way and chairing the key councils and otherwise. But I think it absolutely can help, because whilst it's very important that we have the relationship directly with the European Commission. My colleague Nick Thomas-Symonds works very closely with Maroš Šefčovič, and the Prime Minister's relationship with Ursula von der Leyen. I have a lot of dealings with individual commissioners as well, Marta Kloss, over a number of issues and so on. In the end, of course, there is a political debate, and there's a political debate amongst the member states, and that's why it's very important that we have those bilateral partnerships, the relationship as well with the European External Action Service and Council's mandates on issues, and that relationship with the Commission. And for me, they're all mutually reinforcing. It's not for us to, cut across EU decision-making processes. Those are well understood. We're not part of them anymore. But equally, maintaining those strong direct relationships is important. So that's why we've kind of pursued a sort of a multi-track approach of our UK-EU relationship and the very successful summit, but also the UK-Ireland relationship. We've got a new treaty. I think we have the German ambassador here as well. Our new treaty with Germany, which will hopefully be signed soon. A real gap actually in that sort of bilateral partnerships, really upgrading that to the level of the relationship that we all know that it is. We're hosting President Macron shortly for a state visit and a key UK-France summit, upgrade our Lancaster House arrangements. I was in Poland just the week before last discussing the UK-Polish treaty, which we will hopefully have agreed by the end of the year. So we've been pursuing this on many, many different levels, and they're all mutually complementary in my view.
I mean, we've seen that the Prime Minister Starmer has taken a genuine interest in the relationship with Ireland, and I suppose what I'm really looking for here, you might not want to use words like leverage, but the extent to which that relationship, as it's further nurtured, can help both parties on that other relationship, the EU-UK relationship. So, I mean, I remember in 2016, the time of Brexit, and I was just coming out of government, and we were saying, or hoping, maybe more wishful thinking, maybe than anything else, that we could help the UK in that scenario, in certain terms of being a bit of a bridge. And people made that point over the years. It didn't perhaps necessarily happen the way people hoped it would, but it now does seem to be a genuine bridge there that can help the three sides, as it were, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, absolutely. But I certainly wouldn't put it in terms of leverage, but I would almost turn it around on the other way. If there are problems and challenges in bilateral relationships, as there have been and certainly were under the last government, then that can hinder a new and refreshed relationship with the EU as a whole, because understandably the EU is going to stand behind member states and support them in difficulties they have. And actually, if you look at another topic, I've been very heavily involved in the very successful agreement we've just come to on Gibraltar. Now, this has always been a challenge in UK-Spanish relationships, despite UK and Spain having incredibly close ties, again, people and tourism and business and energy and so on. What a remarkable turnaround that has been. And, we've come together, we've spent a lot of time in good faith working with each other in a new spirit of cooperation. And we've come to a deal that doesn't cross our principles on Gibraltar, but is going to set up not only a good thing for, people on both sides of the border of Gibraltar and Spain, but actually is going to, I think, open up a new era in UK-Spanish relationships. And also will not undermine, again, European conversations. So I think it's turning it around that way as well. We've got to have positive relations with key partners and friends. And
do you think the atmosphere, as you visit European capitals and so on, it clearly has improved, just for those of us just reading it third hand in newspapers and so on. What's the atmosphere like for the UK now?
It genuinely has changed. I don't say that sort of blow our own trumpet. I mean, the ability with which we have now to pick up the phone to European counterparts, and by the way, not just EU counterparts, but others, including Norway and colleagues in the Western Balkans and others, is just transformative. So, take a completely different topic, the very disturbing and deteriorating situation in Georgia that we've seen in recent days with the arrest of senior opposition politicians and a real turning away from a Euro-Atlantic path by the Georgian Dream leadership. I was able to coordinate a call with multiple European colleagues the other day to discuss this at a drop of a hat, come together, common values, common principles. EU's in the room, EU member states are in the room. Non-EU member states are in the room, but we're all working together on a common agenda. Similarly, I mentioned the Western Balkans. I've done a lot of work with my French colleague Ben Haddad on those issues. So I'll work together in Moldova. So I think it has opened up new doors to cooperation that's having a tangible impact. But also, I think the leadership that particularly the Prime Minister has shown in relation to Ukraine, in relation to sort of Euro-Atlantic relations, I think is genuinely appreciated and welcomed, and just the spirit in which we're approaching things.
So looking at, I suppose, big picture globally, your area, your remit is quite broad, covers a big part of the world. The most significant, the most troubling conflicts in the world. I mean, there are more than two, but the ones that we think of are Ukraine and the Middle East. There are others, of course. Just taking the Middle East, in the last few days, there does seem to be some movement in relation to an agreement, whether by way of a ceasefire that might be short-lived or something longer. How do you assess that at the moment?
I mean, I don't want to get ahead of sort of ongoing conversations, but we've been at the heart, obviously, of engagement with partners across the region. The Foreign Secretary and others have spent an immense amount of time working with countries in the region, but also with partners in the United States and in the European Union, not only on the situation, horrific situation in Gaza, but also in relation to the situation on the West Bank, obviously Lebanon. And then what we've seen in recent weeks, obviously in relation to Iran, and of course the changes that we're seeing in Syria. So there are multiple different factors going on at the same time. We've been at the heart of conversations. We've also taken some distinctly different approaches to issues since we came into office. We immediately called for a ceasefire in relation to Gaza. We remain resolutely committed to a two-state solution. We want to see the remaining hostages returned. We've also been very clear that some of the actions and comments that we've seen in recent weeks have been completely unacceptable, and we took a decision to sanction Ben Gvir and Smotrich. We've suspended multiple arms export licenses, and we've taken a very bold and strong position on those issues, but also been at the heart of the diplomatic efforts. So, and you've seen what the Foreign Secretary was doing with European and indeed other counterparts engaging with Iran and others, and we obviously urge Iran to go back to a diplomatic track on these issues.
I was at an event the other afternoon when the Taoiseach Minister of Foreign Affairs referred to the two-state solution and said, in the context of Ireland's view, and for having taken a view in relation to the recognition of the Palestinian state, he said, how can a two-state solution make any sense if countries don't recognize both? And I'm wondering, and I know there have been discussions and perhaps it's a work in progress. Do you want to say anything about the UK's, view or likely view, or where those discussions are going in relation to recognition of that?
Our position is, as it has been, we support a two-state solution. We support a diplomatic process going forward. We want to see a Palestinian state alongside an Israeli state, both safe and secure and sovereign. And in terms of recognition that would have to come as part of a diplomatic process towards a two-state solution. So our position on that has been very, very clear and consistent for a long time. The immediate focus, of course, has to be on ending the horrific scenes that we're seeing, and whether that's the conflict itself, or indeed the horrific humanitarian situation and the getting humanitarian access in. I worked on many of these issues in my former life, and the scenes have been utterly harrowing and horrendous. And as a constituency representative, representing incredibly diverse communities and meeting people who've been connected to those who've been taken hostage, or those who had family living in Rafah. This is it's one of the most appalling situations. What I would say is that it hasn't just been, though, on the Middle East, where we've tried to show leadership in some of these areas. Sudan, for example, an issue that has been, quite frankly, far too forgotten by the world. A devastating death toll, appalling atrocities. The Foreign Secretary and the UK have shown huge leadership on that issue too, in the United Nations and elsewhere.
This podcast is brought to you by the IIEA, sharing ideas, shaping policy.